are the Ikhwan, the brothers, the brother Muslim. Okay, I'm making a video on it, but just in general, the Muslim Brotherhood are basically what I absolutely dislike with passion is that people would say it's a reactionary movement that started to fight colonialism. It's a reactionary anti-colonialism movement. Now, everybody who describes the Muslim Brotherhood like that, show them the cliff and tell them to jump off. Because they're losers. They're losers. Here's what they actually are. By the way, the story of the Muslim Brotherhood starts way before the actual the founding of 1928, because there was a spiritual or line of thinking that had developed gradually. So the first thing that started was in the end of the 19th century. There was a Mecca conference in Mecca where Muslims, permanent Muslims, had sat down and said, "You guys, look at us. We're losers. We are like, the Ottoman Empire, which still existed, was called the dying man of the dying man or the of Europe for centuries. How much of a feudal behind they were with everything." So then they met up in Mecca and they sat down and said, "You guys, why are we losers? Why are we such losers?" And they were like, they reached the clear conclusion that it is because the imams and their spiritual leaders were not following Muslim Islam strictly enough, and basically they put the blame on their leadership, saying they are not following Islam properly. Kind of like, within, in the same kind of spirit where people say communism is the best system, it was never tried properly. That was the first conclusion. But what happened in the end of that meeting, this is where the actual spirit of the Muslim Brotherhood started. Because what they did is something like that, okay? Now, look at this room. If each and one of us would now, reach your hand and would grab with your hand a person that is next to you, and you now all together start working on reviving Islam. So basically that is where it actually started, because the concept is grab your friend by the hand and lead and bring them to Islam. That is the conclusion of that Mecca meeting in the end of the 19th century. All right. But their conclusion was also communism is great, except Islam is great, but the proper Islam was never tried. Same kind of conclusion that communist lovers have, but on Islam. And their methodology was, let's, each of us grab a friend and and go to the shelter together. No, then bring them to Islam. Anyway. So that's how it started. Then what happened was that the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and for the first time in 1400 years, there was no caliphate at all. And this is when they came to the amazing conclusion: if we cannot blame the leaders for not doing proper Islam, because there is no caliphate and no leaders, then we have to blame someone else. And they chose to blame the colonialism or the West, right? Like, okay, not because now Ataturk took and made Turkey secular, and now everybody is like, okay, no Islam, there is no caliphate. So who are you gonna blame for not doing Islam properly? No, nothing. No, not now. The goal is to bring Islam to everywhere in the world. And just like, a friend grabs a friend and brings them to the pyramid scheme that is called the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's a pyramid scheme, okay? And that pyramid scheme, the problem is that the Muslim Brotherhood, what they did in Egypt is that they hooked up the lower stratum of Egypt to to aid. They started feeding the poor in Egypt. And when they started feeding the poor in Egypt, they created an army because they were now in debt to the Muslim Brotherhood and they wanted to take over. They got caught, banned, but the thing is that the population learned to depend on subsidies, and if there was nobody who would offer, like if there they are this, so every time what happened is that those who wanted to take power understood that they don't have an option but to subsidize the food and stuff like that, because otherwise there would be a rebellion, because they already got used to their bread being paid for by others.